LBR LBO Infrastructure Summit 2016.
Good evening, everybody. It's always a pleasure to do a bit of show and tell about what we're trying to do in the megapolis. So I'm just going to jump right in. And since the time is very short, I'm going to really focus on the forward-looking side of this. I won't spend a whole lot of time talking about the issues and the problems. I think many of you know about many of them. Maybe we'll pick up some of them in the discussion. But as Dr. De Silva said, the megapolis is fundamentally about repositioning Sri Lanka. And in this case, really consolidating the position of Colombo and the Western Province at large as the only truly global enclave in the Indian Ocean region. That's really what we're going for. So let me just jump right in. First of all, I think it's worth spending a bit of time to understand what the megapolis is. We are not sitting in a room in the ministry drawing out every street corner, what tree is going to go in your backyard, and so on. The idea is to put a structure around the Western Province, which can then drive the evolution of the city. Evolution of cities is a very, very long-term business. Parakramabahu didn't build his kingdom in a year. The lake took 12 years. The rest of the city took much longer. What we're trying to do is set a rational path for the evolution of the city. And that's really the fundamental basis. So let me just spend a bit of time to go through the conceptual framework of what we're talking about. We obviously have key issues like urban sprawl that's kind of eating up into neighborhoods, congestion, bad land use, and so on. So here's conceptually the way we look at this. This is a map of the Western Province, roughly correlates with population density. So first, what we're trying to do is start defining the edges of what is urban. We need to contain this pattern of sprawl that is really eating into our wetlands, into our natural habitats, driving congestion, and so on. So we're looking at defining these edges and looking at nodes within the urban landscape in Sri Lanka that we need to go in and densify and improve. We also then need to start looking at how do you connect these various nodes around the Western Province to make them function as one integrated whole. So we're looking at a very, very sharp focus on mass transit. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. Again, there's a focus session on this tomorrow, which I think you'll get a lot more meat out of as well. Of course, we've got key towns in the Western Province, Kalutara, Gampaha, and so on. And there's no idea of abandoning these cities. The idea is take what you've got and upgrade it, improve it, fill the gaps, make social and environmental infrastructure work properly, regulate land use properly, optimize what you have. But the really new piece, in a way, is these specialized economic clusters that in some way mirror the economic policy agenda of the government. So first is Colombo CBD. The intention is to consolidate the Colombo Central Business District as a financial and service cluster within the country, and actually very much in the region as well. The second is to look at how we manage industry. Right now, we have industry scattered all over the Western Province, which makes it very, very difficult to operate, very, very difficult to regulate, and it doesn't really provide for efficient expansion of industry. So the idea is, how do you create focused enclaves where you have better plug-and-play infrastructure and the full gamut of services and infrastructure that you need to make industry really efficient and to make living near industry palatable. Then obviously the airport expansion is on, and related to this, we do see the potential for an airport-linked activity cluster. I'll talk about this in a little bit. And then also the science and technology cluster. Again, I think Mohandan will talk about it, but this is a sector that's growing at 20% plus year on year, but it doesn't really have a home. And the idea is to create an ecosystem where we really can create this, have this cosmopolitan, techie, creative kind of environment. Logistics obviously is a very big play. We're looking to consolidate logistics within the corridor between the airport and the port, really. I'll talk about each of these a little bit more. And then the plantation-related cluster is centered on Avisavela, and another forest-related cluster centered on Matugama. And then, of course, tourism will continue to be a driver. We expect this to be concentrated along the coast. So transport is top of mind for many people. Again, there's a long session on this tomorrow. But the big idea is completely rethink transport and put public transport at the top of the agenda and invest heavily in this and drive a transition from this growth in private transport to a growth in public transport. And the way we look at this has 4 real prongs. First is to modernize the entire bus system. I think the buses that run today are the same buses that were running on the roads 30 years ago. They're probably plying the same routes. They have not been upgraded. They're pretty pathetic. But the income levels of the country have gone up dramatically, and therefore people don't want to ride in hot, sweaty, smelly buses. They basically want to get into private cars. So that's why you're seeing an increase in this. So modernize the entire bus fleet. Take the rail corridors that we have, the rail infrastructure that we have, and completely modernize it and bring this up to the 21st century. Electrify it, improve services, improve frequency, increase speeds, 2 to 3 minute heads. So you're talking about fast, efficient, modern rail. And then introducing a modern rapid transit system, a light metro or a light rail system that will serve trunk routes to kind of move people, masses of people, very, very fast. And finally, some limited use of inland water transport. But the important thing here is not that any one of these will solve the problem. It's the integration of these that will solve the problem. The buses feed into rail feeds into the city, and so on. So it's an integrated look at transport we're taking. I'm not going to get into this. So the science and technology cluster, a very interesting idea. The idea is, how do you create an environment for the tech industry to thrive? How do you create an environment that is conducive for cosmopolitan talent? And the idea is bring in world-class research universities, try to bring in world-class tech providers, and really develop a complete ecosystem around the technology sector. I'm not going to spend too much time. Mirigama Industrial Township, another key cluster. Here we're looking at about 3,000 to 4,000 acres of land that we hope to develop incrementally over the next 20 or so years into a major industrial township. It's a key town because it's going to be on the one of the exits on the Kandy-Colombo Expressway and the branch off north. We already have a rail connection. There's ample land availability, and we feel that this is actually interesting large-scale opportunity. The Aero City is basically adjacent to the airport, and what we're talking about here is finding a home for industries that can build off of increased airside connectivity, things like big box retail, theme parks, a convention, and so on. And that plugs into the ecosystem that is existing in Negombo, and of course it's only 15 minutes away from Colombo at the same time. Horona Industrial Township is another one. I expect this will actually move faster than Mirigama because there's a larger kind of concentration of industry already in place. But smaller clusters of development. Again, the whole idea is not just industrial estates, but the full gamut of infrastructure that goes into this. And logistics, obviously very, very important. We're doing this port expansion. The biggest hindrance we have for our logistics play is landside assets. We're right up against the city. So in order to really capitalize on the logistics potential, we do need landside assets for warehousing, for entrepot activity. And the idea is to position this off the highway between Colombo and the airport, towards the east of Jaila, for example. And that provides a much more efficient way to get cargo in and out. And the port access highway will actually make this zone effectively 15 minutes from the port. Avissavel, the plantation city, is a much more acupuncture-like intervention. We're talking a network of small townships, not a dramatic major urbanization, but really go in where there is development and kind of upgrade it, bring it to kind of present day standards. And the same in the Forest City in the southeast section. Here we're talking about programs to really have nature-based development models with reforestation and so on. But the really exciting thing to me, where we're starting to do a bit more deep dive, is what we're trying to do in downtown. What we're trying to do here is really redefine what Colombo is. Preserve what is unique about our heritage, about the context, and develop a network of public spaces and an environment that is really open to every citizen in the country. So let me just kind of share with you a few quick images. So here's Colombo Fort, and the major kind of transit arteries are outlined here. As you know, the light rail is funded and it will go ahead, and that runs straight through here. The port access highway is ongoing, and so on. But when you look at the open space network, it's quite interesting that we have actually a fair bit of open space in this area that is not currently linked up. And the idea is look at the major green spaces in the city and make the entire district much, much more walkable, and integrate this very much with the walkability ideas that you saw in Port City. So the idea is take Colombo downtown into a very, very walkable, very, very people-friendly city. We've also started to look at, how do you capitalize on the potential of a place like Bere Lake? It's a fantastic water body, which we have completely turned our back on. And we're talking about, cleaning up the lake, really capitalizing on the value that this will create, and have densification that effectively cradles this water, and do this in a very sensitive, very kind of methodical way through land use regulation. And these are very early sketches. But why this really is exciting and really is within reach is this. We have over 200 acres of state land around Bere Lake. It's scattered among various government agencies, but it's government-owned land. And the idea is, how do you systematically release this and controlled release to drive a complete transformation of downtown? And that's really the opportunity that we have on hand. And we're looking very, very sharply at this at the moment to do this in a very systematic way. Of course, when you look at Bere Lake, there's also really interesting opportunities for landmark and signature architecture as well. But here's one project, for example, what we call Colombo Nexus, the multimodal hub development in Fort. It's where the current railway station, Manning Market area is right now. It's about a 34-acre site right in the heart of Fort, all state-owned land, that we are trying to work with to basically consolidate the light rail, the rail, and the bus into one integrated hub facility, which frees up a lot of real estate around it. But what's interesting about this is once you do this, you have 600,000 people going through this place every day. It's a phenomenal commercial opportunity. And by consolidating this, you unleash the value that comes with this consolidation of 600,000 people a day. And you unleash the value of the real estate around it. And remember, this is just a stone's throw from the waterfront. So it's a really interesting kind of inflection point and very much within touching distance. As I said before, this particular site is where these four elements of the transport network will come together: the light rail, the electrified rail, the bus, and so on. And I'll share with you a couple of images. These are just early stage urban design sketches to give you a sense of what we're talking about. This is DR Vijayavardhana Mahatha. That you see going up to Nelumkulumna. Basically, the stretch from Lake House all the way up to Nelumkulumna is state-owned land. And what we can do in this area is define a completely new skyline for Colombo, a completely new skyline. And opportunities like this come once in a lifetime to really come in and recraft the skyline and the state of a city that is a living, functioning city. And this, to me, is the planner's really dream. But the physical is the part that's kind of cute. But I think we need to stop and step back and think about what is it we're trying to achieve. It's not really just a glitzy, glamorous city. At the end of the day, this is about improving the quality of life of Sri Lankans. Making the city nicer, accessible, less congested, more livable for every citizen of Sri Lanka. And creating spaces that are accessible to all. We want to make sure that there's housing for all kinds of people in this place, not just the rich, not just the poor, but really create the canvas for an integration of society, to really engineer a cosmopolitan society and urban spaces that can actually drive a transformation of the way we live. We're looking at efficient transportation systems, really to compact the city, not just for the sake of transport. I mean, the example I like to talk about is, now you can drive from Malambe to Fort, and it'll take you about 1.5 hours. Once we have this light rail in, it's going to take you 20 to 30 minutes. 22 minutes is what people tell me. It's going to fundamentally shrink the way we look at this city. It's going to be a different place. When the electrification of the rail is going to be create a completely different setup as well. And the back end of this, what we do hope is that the megapolis, the physical strategy and the structure of the megapolis drives or enables the transformation of the economy and the generation of higher value jobs. So create the canvas to do the higher end industry, to do the IT, to do the other things that the minister and the others talk about. Create the canvas for this. And at the end, create not just Colombo, but a network of cities in the Western province that together function basically as one integrated whole, and together form the most competitive, most livable enclave in the South Asia region. So this is not just a pipe dream. Enabling investments are actually ongoing. So the railway electrification, the funding is more or less committed. Feasibility studies are ongoing. The first stretch is from Panaduru to Veyangoda, and that's very, very real. The inland water transport, we're getting ready to do the tender now. We've got the light rail project, which the government of Japan has agreed to go along with us. And we're now jumping into the feasibility study for the Malambe to Colombo section, and that, again, is funded, and that's ongoing. The port access highway, which will basically make the airport within 20 minutes, really, from downtown, is actually on the cards and funded and ongoing as well. And there's a middle-income housing program, which we've launched. We've got 6 sites that have been tendered. The UDA has established now a very robust land tender process and is incrementally releasing strategic lands as well. So these things are actually now moving. And what we focused on in the first stage is set the framework infrastructure, set the skeleton, and push the government financing in the areas where you need to set these structures that set the basis for the evolution of the city, not for the next 10 years. These are investments that will drive the transformation of our city and our region for the next century or more. And that's what we're doing. Of course, the path ahead is not a walk in the park. It's full of challenges. We cannot solve all of our problems, and we certainly can't solve it immediately. It's going to take time, and it's going to be an incremental, measured rollout that we have to do. We will also have no perfect solutions to extremely complex, multifaceted urban problems. So this iterative process, this engagement, is actually quite important to optimize ideas and go forward. But at the end of it, I think what's important is that we have an ethos in the people that drive this project, in the country at large, an ethos of sustainability, an ethos of really thinking not really just about ourselves in the next 3-4 years, but thinking about the next generation. What are we creating for the next generation? And we must resist the temptation, I think, to think very, very long term and focus towards the end. And that's what we have to do. So it's a very, very challenging task, but I think it's going to be an interesting ride. And I think what we do in the next year is going to define the trajectory of this country for the next century. And that's, to me, extremely exciting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nayana, for lifting our imagination a little bit and making us think about a complete transformation in the city. I think that's a very challenging thing, and you've done it well.
LBR LBO Infrastructure Summit 2016.